says, which is named Theme 2 Session 1, is actually becoming Theme 3 Session 1. So if you're speaking for Theme 3, please, when we assign you, accept the assignment and move to the other room. But otherwise, please reject, and you can continue staying here for Theme 1 Session 2. Okay, so for...
Can I ask?
Yes.
Hello, can I start?
Hello, I'll make you a co-host. And just to confirm, so we have Edmondo, Michelle, Brian. I saw Brian here. Ali, please start with your prepared remarks. And as you share your remarks, I will quickly go to the other, pay a quick visit to the other room and bring some speakers back here.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all here today. My name is Dr. Ali Sharaghi, the chairman of Manchester Innovation Institute and a member of Urban Economy Forum. I would like to apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names. Please feel free to correct me at any point. Today we have six speakers and 4 panelists. There are 7 minutes for each speaker to talk through their presentations and 5 minutes for each panelist to provide their remarks. Following this, we move on to a 30-minute discussion. I will not interrupt you, but within the last minute, I will remind you of the limited time you have remaining by saying 1 minute. Because Alex is not here, is in the other session, then before we get started, I would like to introduce my colleague in Manchester Innovation Institute, Dr. Saeed, who will be on standby to help out with any unexpected technical issues. Okay, the aim of this session is to talk about urban economy theories and action, where we'll go over the Urban Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which were adopted by all UN members in 2015. Here we will also cover the means which will help us achieve the SDG 11, creating sustainable and resilient cities. This can be done through different means, such as facilitating a dialogue between cities and municipalities, financial institutions, and the private sector, discovering financial urban resources on various scales, creating a global municipal database, launching a global network for city leaders, and so on. Okay, let's see if we have all the speakers and panelists with us. Let's start with Edmondo. Are you here, Edmondo?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Okay, now we can make a start. Then let's start with the first speaker on agenda, Mr. Edmondo Werner, professor of School of Built Environment and Architecture, London, South Bank University. Thank you very much. Okay, Edmondo, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. and good afternoon, everyone. In case there is a cut in the connection, you advise me by email or WhatsApp. Ali has the WhatsApp because I'm far away from address this important forum, in particularly the session which combines theory and action. Starting with theory, urban economics' traditional concern was location theory, how to optimize distance from the city center and its interaction with land prices. A development from this came with the concept of economies of agglomeration, including labor pooling, networks of specialized suppliers with clusters, and positive technological externalities. These theoretical elements were important for policy making, yet not enough. While cities were and are engines of economic development, they often also concentrate negative externalities regarding unemployment, lack of decent work, unaffordable and badly located housing, and congestion pollution. Urban political economy investigated unequal social relations. The view of productivity and competitiveness went two ways. On one side, business as usual represented a downloading of socio-economic and environmental responsibilities and aggressive cost reduction. An alternative approach recognized that productivity and competitiveness could emerge as a result of a different corporate while increasing the value added of products. Now I will explore what I call this alternative view, moving from theory to action. The growth of the economy has to be people-centered, and I'll mention three issues. First, to use economic growth to provide quality services to the population. Second, bear in mind the need to generate local jobs through pro-employment policies, not just to sell raw products and to cash in profits that are not distributed. Third, the quality of jobs that provide a decent revenue, that are safe and respect the rights of workers. These are important elements of the right to the city. One good practice from Asia is Marikina, Philippines. In Africa, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. In Latin America, Santo André, Brazil. There are other examples as well. To conclude, 4 suggestions, not as a recipe, but as elements for discussion. 1, explore the distinctiveness of the local economy and avoid one-size-fits-all. Priority areas should be identified through the analysis of the comparative advantages, competitive sectors, and available natural assets. 2, have faith in the citizens and invest in local solutions. Of course, it's fine to attract investment, but creating a business-enabling environment to support well-functioning markets that allow local firms to thrive. 3, use to the maximum opportunities that arise. For example, every city requires new infrastructure and maintenance. Let's do it in a way that involves local enterprise that create local jobs. If there is no capacity in terms of skills, let's then include this in the package. And 4, investing in human capital also in the public sector. Let's remember that city councils are not abstract entities. They are composed of people. Staff need training, need decent working conditions, need motivation. Maybe these suggestions or these points would not be necessary to discuss in Canada, which is a rich and well-developed country. But in many other cases, I think that it is necessary to discuss. So in short, we take into consideration the traditional concepts of distance from the central business district, land costs, plus economies of agglomeration, and its ramifications. But we go beyond. Urban economic development means more than just economic growth. It also means promoting participation, dialogue, and transparency, connecting people and their resources for better employment and a higher quality of life. This is important, And it is important to recognize in theory as well as in practice and to create a virtual cycle. Thank you. Over to you, Ali.
Oh, thank you very much, Edmundo. Really, it was insightful talk where you highlighted the importance of creating a people-centered approach to grow the economy. Thank you. Okay, let's go to the next speaker, who is partner of Urban Strategies, Michel Touahmeh. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Oh, thank you. Okay, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Cheragi. Can everyone hear me and see the screen?
Yes.
Great. So I'd like to begin by extending a warm welcome to our virtual visitors. As a practitioner in planning and urban design, I'm going to focus less on theory and a little bit more on actions. Toronto doesn't need much of an introduction, as many of today's speakers have already done so. So the fact that we are the fastest growing city in North America puts tremendous pressure on our city and our province to get things right. We invariably rank as one of the most livable cities in the world. So we must be getting a few things right, but the benefits of forums such as this one is that we can clearly see that we could do much better. I'm trying to advance here. Why am I not? I'm having a difficulty. Here we go. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Excellent. So, what do livable cities like Toronto have to do with sustainable urbanism? If we'd have time, I'd cover many of the themes outlined here under the headings of economic, environmental, and social sustainability. However, for today, I'll cover just a few things, beginning at the regional scale. Our green belt, which has bounded our region since 2005, has forced our region to begin growing inwardly and imposed a useful discipline, more thoughtfully directing and managing our growth. Our regional growth, among many things, focuses on curbing sprawl with more compact development, revitalizing downtowns, and creating complete communities. Municipalities within the region must regularly report on where and how they will accommodate their share of population growth. In a short 15 years, this has resulted in the regeneration of brownfields and underutilized lands. For example, my firm has been developing master plans for the regeneration of shopping centers and malls into mixed-use complete communities, something we would never have dreamed of doing 15 years ago. We were asleep at the wheel while we accidentally became a fast-growing city. Metrolinx, the agency charged with coordinating transportation, has been trying to catch up. These maps illustrate the planned expansion of our regional transportation network. If we had time, I'd tell you about Downsview, a former military airfield on a huge 800-acre site, the scale of downtown Toronto or lower Manhattan. City-scale sites such as this one are ripe for sustainable urbanism, which embraces the full spectrum of environmental strategies. Downsview is located at the geographic epicenter of Toronto. It is also located at the crest of two watersheds which bookend the city of our city. We're now beginning public engagement and visioning. While it's very early still in our process, water will likely play a key role in structuring our master plan framework. We know what a critical role rainwater, stormwater plays in the lives of cities, and the need to absorb it and mitigate flooding is critical. Tanner Springs in Portland offers a terrific example of stormwater infrastructure that weaves beautifully into the urban fabric. This is sustainable urbanism at its best. Alexandra Park is a downtown Toronto 1960s era social housing neighborhood we master planned for Toronto community housing. The plan integrates new build replacement of affordable community housing with new market housing. I'd go through the plan if we had more time, but I'll briefly touch on the process which led to its creation. Working closely with the community, we used many forms and scales of engagement to develop a shared vision for Alex Park. We first focused on developing principles which would guide the plan. The most important principle was zero displacement, so no one would be compelled to leave the community in order to make room for revitalization. We then articulated a number of design goals, which were followed by 5 different options, which ranged from business as usual to full revitalization. The community endorsed full revitalization. The plan reflects the rich diversity of the community with a rich mix of uses and experiences. Ground is now broken on phase 2 of the revitalization plan, and the community continues to thrive. Earlier today, Jason Tong quoted an Alexandra Park resident who said, the best part is the way revitalization has united Alex Park. Last but not least is the human scale of sustainable urbanism. Toronto's downtown and many greater Golden Horseshoe municipalities are witnessing incredibly fast growth sustained over a few generations. We modeled downtown Toronto as it was in 2000. So this is the view of the city as it was in 2000. And this is a model we've captured of what we expect Toronto to look like in 2025. So in just a mere 5 years. You can see all the approved buildings in blue. You can see all of the, in purple, all of the applications that are currently pending. And then in gray, you can see that what has already been built. How are we dealing with rapid growth, predominantly in the form of tall and mid-rise buildings? We were engaged by the City of Toronto to develop guidelines which focus on how mid-rise tall buildings can be developed as vertical communities to support social interaction and better accommodate the needs of all households, including those with children, thinking about communities through the eyes of a child and by extension, the full life cycle. We focused on practical needs, such as making sure there's enough room in entranceways to park strollers or a walker or a wheelchair. The guidelines address 3 scales: the neighborhood, the building, and the unit. Our intention is that the guidelines evolve and adapt to change over time. Cities change at a snail's pace, yet our recent COVID-19 experience includes a few rapid accelerations as witnessed by the 40 kilometers of new bike lanes seemingly installed overnight. Likewise, after months of lockdown, Toronto has enabled restaurants to operate curbside. 9 kilometers of parking transformed into 750 curbside patios. While the impact of COVID-19 has been devastating to cities around the world, the unusually rapid response Toronto has experienced is a reminder that among urbanism's many scales, the scale of time is equally important. As Patrick Geddes famously said, a city is more than a place in space. It is a drama in time. Cities are constantly changing and reinventing themselves. Nothing is static. And in COVID-19 pandemic provides a perfect example of how nimbleness, science, creativity, and leadership in city building best support a sustainable urbanism.
Okay.
This is a lot to go through in a short time, so I'll leave it at that For those of you who have further questions, you can reach me through Urban Strategies. I hope to have the opportunity to meet all of you in person next year. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle, for your excellent presentation on an action-based approach to sustainable urbanism in Toronto. Thank you. Okay, we can continue on the next speaker, Mr. Brian Holland from American University and BLH Technologies. Floor is yours, Brian. Brian, can you hear me? Mr. Holland, can you hear me? Oh, it seems that is a connection problem. Brian? Okay. Let's next move on to the next speaker, and we back to Brian. The next speaker is Ali Al-Mughazi. Ali, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I can hear you. Ali Al-Mughazi, co-author of Oiling the Urban Economy. Ali, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Well, first, I would like to thank you all for being here, and I would like to make a slight correction that I'm not the co-author of Oiling the Labor Economy. I'm here in place of the author of the Oiling Labor Economy, Professor Dr. Franklin Obeng Odum.
Thank you very much for your correction.
I will now start my presentation by sharing my screen, and please tell me if you have any difficulty in seeing it. Can you see the PowerPoint now?
I think so. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I will speak about the problems facing urban economies when they are based on a single economic activity. And the case here will be the oil sector. I will be discussing a case of an Egyptian oil city, the city of Ras Gharib. The city of Ras Gharib is a company town, and I will give you a brief overview of how the city evolved from being worker housing through into administrative housing, and finally into company town. How it was developed by the Anglo-Egyptian Oil Fields Company, and then which was later nationalized into the General Petroleum Company in Egypt. So workers' accommodation would start by housing workers close to the production sites, or employing workers living in the proximity of the production sites. Then the companies, the production management, would provide those housing units. And finally, with the buildup of amenities and services, these housing units or these housing arrangements will develop into company towns. With regard to the situation of Ras Gharib is an Egyptian oil city. It is located in the Red Sea, on the Red Sea coast of Egypt. It was built from scratch. The location was not inhabited before 1938, when it was developed by the Anglo-Egyptian Oil Fields Company. And that's an aerial reconnaissance image by the German Air Force in the World War II. And then this is a more recent image of the city. I think you can have an idea about how the city developed over the past 80 years. In that city, the oil company played the role of providing oil services. to the extent that government official would consider the General Petroleum Company as the mother of Ras Gharib. Among these services was housing, but with the advent of neoliberal changes, the General Petroleum Company, which is a government-owned company, was pressed into shedding off excess costs and started by passing on the burden of housing to the residents and the local government. So instead of the company providing the housing to the employees who made the core of the population, this burden was moved on to the local government and the residents themselves. A very important situation in this regard was the southern area of the city, which was considered a high-end development and comprised of standalone villas on the beachfront allocated for high-ranking company officials. Now, with time, those high-ranking company officials would remain in these units even after becoming pensioners, and even like passing on them as to their inheritors. The policy of transferring the burden of housing to the employees meant that the company would transfer the ownership of all housing units owned by the company to the employees, so that the company will not bear the cost of maintaining those units, with the exception of this special area, because it has higher real estate value, and there were rumors among the population that the company intended to diversify its portfolio through investing into tourist real estate. That's an example of one of these units. The problem is that in a city like Ras Gharib, the entire city is based on the petroleum, on the oil industry, and the General Petroleum Company is the main employer. So there is no economic diversification, and there is some sort of monopoly of service provision and provision of jobs. So basically, when the workers or the residents have nowhere else to look for the service, like housing, the local government is only starting to step in, but they still have a very large gap to fill. And pertaining the problems of oil cities regarding the current COVID-19 pandemic and crisis, and further climate change and decarbonization related efforts, an oil city by definition will face, like a city like Ras Gharib faced a lot of layoffs among the workers, and people would simply have to move out because there is nothing else to do. There is no other economic activity for the people to work in. So if they got terminated or laid off, simply have to leave. There is no other way to work. There is no other way to work and earn a living in the city except in the petroleum sector due to the economic diversification. This was amplified by the fluctuation of oil demand due to the prices, and this gives an idea of what can happen to these cities as a result of climate change mitigation and adaptation policies and the drive for decarbonization. So a lot of work has to be done towards the diversification of local economies in oil cities, particularly perhaps by introducing more climate-friendly industries and economic activities. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you
for your informative talk on the situation in Ras Gharib. Thank you. Okay, Brian, if the connection is better, we will now get back to you. Are you there, Brian? Brian? Mr. Brian Holland?
Sorry, communicating with him. Apparently, he does not have a mic.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm trying to connect through his phone. So I'll let you know, Ali, as soon as he's connected again.
Okay.
But please, I think we can go ahead with our next speaker.
Okay, next speaker is Komarsh Misra, former Deputy Secretary General of Habitat 3. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A very good morning from New Delhi, India.
Oh,
It's about 1:45 in the morning in New Delhi, but it's such a great fun and such a learning experience listening to all of you and the presentations.
thank you. How is the weather there?
The weather is getting better. Now it's getting cooler. Otherwise, we had August, we had lots of rains, but yeah, it's getting better now. It's more like an autumnish weather.
Thank you.
And I was the Deputy Secretary General for Habitat 3. And as many of you would be aware, that Habitat 1 actually took place in Vancouver, Canada. That was in 1976. Then I met the mayor of Istanbul, and he was visiting Nairobi, where my headquarters was there. And I asked the mayor of Istanbul, the former mayor of Istanbul, are you going to come to Habitat 3? That was going to take place in Quito, Ecuador. That was in 2016, in urban October, from 17th to 20th of October, 2016. The mayor of Istanbul, he remembered it. He said, yes, I remember. And there was this Secretary General. He was a black gentleman. Where is he now? And none of us, he was talking of 1996. That was Habitat 2, which took place in Istanbul, Turkey. So we tried to look around. We said he must have retired and gone. He said, no, but he wasn't that old. And of course, before he left, we found out, because that he had actually retired and he was doing some farming in Gambia. He was from Gambia. Now this mayor of Istanbul, who remembered very fondly what he had presided over as Habitat 2 in Istanbul, and remembered the Secretary General of Habitat 2, was actually President Erdogan. So he was visiting Nairobi as President of Turkey, and he was the mayor of Istanbul when Habitat 2 took place. So when we came to Habitat 3, this was in Quito, Ecuador, it was a very, very big exercise. And that exercise, sometimes we have spoken, there has been a reference to the New Urban Agenda and the comprehensive nature of the declaration from the heads of states, almost 193 member states of the United Nations. They all signed on it, agreed to the New Urban Agenda. But the elaborate preparation that took place in every continent in terms of taking the feedback from every continent. Then apart from that, there were regional preparatory conferences. 3 regional preparatory conferences took place. Then, of course, the final deliberations at the UN headquarters in terms of the New Urban Agenda, which took place almost for 36 hours continuously. At middle of the night in New York, we are trying to get pizzas from outside to feed to members of the delegates and members of the Secretariat. So indeed, it was an enormous effort in terms of getting the New Urban Agenda. It's a great agreement. It is elaborate. It covers everything. It actually gives life to SDG 11 in terms of sustainable cities and communities. And if you go through the New Urban Agenda, what the beauty of that document is, it does not have one uniform recipe, but it does give the choice, and almost at the end it says, and in the introduction, the then Secretary General also mentions that one size doesn't fit all. So we have differences. Now, given the New Urban Agenda, so the key challenge over there, as most of the people who are in markets and others, they always talk of successful markets and businesses as location, location, location. And any of these UN declarations, ultimately, even including the New Urban Agenda, means implementation, implementation, and implementation. Therefore, what we do need to add is not another declaration, but in terms of giving shape to the agreement that has already been achieved. But one challenge that needs to come up, that has come up, and that I say from the point of view of a developing country sitting in New Delhi, India, is the enormous disruption that has come because of COVID-19. Where you are sitting in Canada, where 90% of people live in urban areas, we still have just about 31% people living in urban areas. And 69% is still in rural areas. Though the GDP contribution is about 45 from rural areas and 55 from urban areas. So you have this challenge. Now, when COVID-19 took place, and that's the challenge of urbanization, and that is a lot of thinking that we need to do from developing countries, especially countries like India, where we need a lot of exchanges with other cities in Canada, in US, and others. The challenge is, when that COVID-19 lockdown took place, almost 20 million people wanted to rush back. They didn't want to spend time in the urban area. Because these were the people who were working in urban areas, their livelihood was from urban areas, but their home and families in large number of cases were still living in rural areas. So they had one foot in the rural area and the other foot in the urban area. So they were like migrant workers with truly migrant nature. They maybe even had homes. So we have these additional challenges. But of course, our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has really focused on urban areas, and therefore housing, he has focused that by 2022, he is going to make almost 10 million houses, 2 million of which would be in urban areas and rest would be in rural areas. So housing has been a big pitch. For the first time in India, urbanization has received much greater attention from the policy makers and the decision makers. One, because the nature, of course, the urbanization, the contribution of urban areas has increased, the monetary values has increased, whereas earlier it was the rural areas which was dominating, and you have most of your electors and people who elect, they also come from the rural areas. So there's a very different challenge that you see in a country like India, and that also challenge posed by COVID-19 in terms of seeing an urban population which is on the move. Now, the moment the things started opening up after the lockdown, the businesses in urban areas were desperate to get the workers from rural areas, because they could not replace them. They had their arrangements with these people, they were experienced, they were knowledgeable, and even these people who had migrated rural areas as an insurance, where their home was, hearth was, wives were there, children were there, they also wanted to move back because there is no money in rural areas, there is no employment in rural areas for these people. So it's a very different set of challenges that we find, and we hope that in terms of the kind of discussions that are taking place, we would come back The economy has had a hit of about 23% in this quarter, minus 23%. But the expectation is that there would be a regeneration in terms of this year, and hopefully by next year we should be able to be back to almost normal. So we are on a kind of a reopening phase. So the urban challenges in a developing country, in a country like India, is absolutely humongous. And the other difference that you would see from, you know,
1 minute.
what you are familiar with in Canada, the mayors are very important. There was a book shown by Mr. Pasternak from Toronto saying that mayors rule the country. But in a country like India, it's almost a hierarchy. The biggest people are at the national level. The next are at the provincial level. And the lowest rung in that political hierarchy are in management of cities. And that also reflects the power which is there in terms of allocation of resources and others. That the national level, highest power, highest resources, national level, state level, provincial level, next best, city level, the least. So you have these challenges, very different, and we do need to deal, and I think it's a very good forum that we can try and build bridges and exchange ideas between mayors and people who run the cities in this part of the world with your part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumaresh. It was great. Really, thank you for the history of Habitat 3. Thank you. It was about importance of Habitat 3 and what our next step should be moving forward. Until we get further notification about Brian, our final speaker for today is Brenda Moore, President of Michigan Municipal League and Mayor pro tem of Saginaw. Are you available? Are you there? Brenda?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Yes. The floor is yours.
I'm so sorry. First of all, let me thank you all for having me for such an important discussion.
Welcome.
We are a small, medium city. And so I just want to share with you. I need to make one correction though. 4 days ago, I am now the former president for Municipal League. 4 days ago, we picked a new one. And so his name is Bill Wiles, and he is the mayor of Westland. But getting back to me, I'm the mayor pro tem for the city of Saginaw. Our population is about 50,000, a little under 50,000, and we're on the east side of Michigan. For the last year, I have served as the Municipal League's president. And what that entails is 500 villages and cities over the state of Michigan. I am the first African-American female in 120 years to ever serve in this position. And part of my charge was to go around and encourage cities and villages to become more engaged in this organization. The League has spent the last decade helping communities create places that are healthy and inclusive and that are economically sustainable. More and more, we found how to build local communities' wealth in so that they can be sustainable. We know the importance of the green space and the nature and how to protect it. So when we talk about what we're doing, we are in Saginaw. We have experienced the water crisis. My city, Saginaw, is 20 minutes from the Saginaw Bay, Lake Huron. And we sit between the city of Flint, Michigan, and Midland. And I'm sure everybody is familiar with Flint, with the water crisis. And Midland, who just had a flood in the month of July, where the dam had broke downtown. Saginaw is very much aware, and we must protect our environment to make sure that we are economic development and sustainable in our city. We have to look at our city, we're looking at our city to change some things. The energy effective upgrade, we want to install the solar panels on our public works and in our city hall building. And we want to replace all of the street lights with LEDs. We are also trying to encourage sustainable economically development, including the green buildings, and we support the growth of newly energy industrial in our region. But like most Midwest cities, Saginaw is not a growing city. So it is hard to make progress and sustainable development. We've lost our population in the last 40 years. 40 years ago, we were like 150 strong. But because of blight and other areas, our area has went down. Saginaw and many other cities in our city in Michigan, we're trying to find a way to support economic development and to make sure that we can become environmental stable. This is one of the reasons why I'm so happy that I led the charge statewide with the Municipal League. This organization fights every day to ensure that our local government has financial resources they need and the tools they need to be sustainable. Thank you. Now I have to leave because I have a prior engagement. So you have my information if anybody needs to talk to me.
Thank you, Brenda, for your excellent talk on the future plans in supporting sustainable economic development in Michigan. Thank you. Now we will move on to the second part of our session, which is the panel response. Okay. The first panelist is Matti Semiatiki, if I'm right. Yes. Oh, thank you, sir. Okay. Association Professor of Geography and Planning and Interim Director of School of Cities, University of Toronto. 5 minutes, please. Thank you. You may now begin.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with everyone and join this fantastic and timely discussion. The moment we're facing right now is interlaced with three intersecting crises. We're clearly in the midst of a public health crisis, and that's capturing everyone's attention and is the most immediate and urgent. Second, we're facing a climate crisis and an environmental crisis, and we see the impacts of that all around the world, from fires to flooding to air pollution and all sorts of, and the impacts, the deep impacts of this environmental crisis of a changing climate. And third, we have a crisis of racism, social exclusion, police brutality that has been with us sadly for centuries and is now come to the fore. And in each of these cases, each of these are very much urban crises. They have, in large measure, their greatest impacts and their causes are in cities. Whether it's the amount of pollution that we produce in cities, that the United Nations consistently documents how much of the pollution, greenhouse gas emissions is coming from cities, how much of the energy emissions are coming from cities, or whether it's police brutality and racism, where we see the images all too frequently coming from cities across this continent and around the world. And then also the COVID-19 crisis very much having its greatest impacts in cities. So cities have been at the epicenter of these three intersecting crises, but they also pose the potential for the solutions. And I think you see it in the social movements, you see it in the types of planning and the types of changes that folks around this call and who have spoken already are working on. The types of changes that are going to be necessary to arrest these crises, to stop the damage and to put us on a better path are very much within cities. And I think that's just for a moment where I want to pause. I think what we're seeing is a new approach to city building, one that is moving away from a winner-takes-all approach, an approach that each individual stakeholder within the city building realm tries to maximize their own interests, maximize their own benefits, push forward as much as they can, because the more that they get, the more that goes into their pocket, and not necessarily considering what's happening around them, because that's someone else's problem and someone else will deal with that. I think what we're seeing coming out of as we enter into the midst of the COVID crisis, and we try to look at what what a new urban future could look like. I think in addition to all of the outcome-based approaches that have been talked about in terms of more mixed-use development, more sustainable forms of transportation, and a much clearer focus on anti-racism, I think we're seeing a new approach to city building, and one that puts collaboration at its core and a focus on what we could call a collaborative advantage. That in many ways, the types of solutions that are going to be found and that are necessary at this moment are not ones that any party could achieve by themselves, but rather by collaboration, we will see outcomes that are better than anyone can deliver on their own. We're seeing this, Michel talked about the types of plans that he and Urban Strategies have been working on in this city. You can start to see in Toronto, just as one example, a wave of what we might call creative mixed-use buildings that integrate large-scale private uses like condominium apartments or commercial spaces or retail, and they integrate them with large-scale public uses. So you're starting to see daycares and community centers and schools being directly integrated into these private uses. And pushing the boundary even further, you're starting to see social services like homeless shelters being integrated right into the sides and right into the same buildings as where some of the more expensive condominiums are being built in the city. This is a radical transformation in the way that we think about city building, the way that we build our cities, one that moves away from single uses, away from being built only around automobile as the primary approach, and moving away from a model where each individual landowner and stakeholder in a city can kind of hive themselves off and be in their own realm. We are moving much more towards this notion of collaboration. And it's in those collaborations that I think we'll start to see the solutions to these interlaced and interconnected crises of a health pandemic alongside a climate change crisis and a crisis of systemic racism. So I want us to then think as a group perhaps about what it means to plan collaboratively and to work towards a collaborative advantage, because it's about having both outcome goals of where we hope to be, but also very much in the processes of what it takes to be good partners and to drive towards a model of city building that sees a greater benefit for everyone when collaboration is achieved and when all of the parties benefit in an arrangement. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for including me in this discussion, and I look forward to the ongoing conversation.
Very excellent. Thank you very much, Mati. Our next panelist is Hala Al-Amin, with her background in architecture, design management, green urban spaces, and sustainable cities. Thank you. You may now begin.
Yeah, hello. First of all, thank you for the invitation, UFE, and thank you for the fruitful presentations from all of the speakers today. It was really very nice and influential. As Mr. Toshmi said earlier, our cities are in continuous change and transformation. And what we're witnessing right now in the whole entire world is a new era, really, from nations rising up to others falling down, to even very funny presidential debates on the TV. We're witnessing change in all the ways, and cities have been changing all through the time. However, right now it's as if rapid urbanization and the new pandemic, which is urban and easily transmitted, it's putting us in the corner where we have to act right now urgently and quickly. To me, it's a new opportunity to find new methods and new solutions to rewrite and re-engineer our cities in a better way. However, there's better chances in new design strategies. However, there are other implications everywhere in all other fields. And I can't see the success except with the collaboration of all industries together, from urbanism to architecture to the economy, to the health sector and the educational sector, all together to work in a collaborative way in order to produce more sustainable and resilient cities. I heard the comment of Dr. Mati earlier about including inclusive designs and including shelters for the homeless in very elegant and high-rise rich buildings. And I happened to witness an area where they introduced a new shelter right now. And the problem is that there are positive implications and negative implications from whatever decision that's being taken and that's happening. There are cases that you will not expect to happen when homeless people live in a certain area that are going on. And there are people that are negative towards whatever whatever such a situation will bring to their community and neighborhood. There's not the one, I can't find any win-win situation. We can only balance it between the success of different criteria together, or we cannot provide everyone with whatever they want, as I am seeing right now. For me, affordable housing and community design should start with biophilic designs in this area, as the pandemic has shown us, and our lockdown in our houses, it has given us like a chance to get closer to nature and to want greenery and nature with us more and more. Nature has been therapeutic all over in all the fields, and I believe that introducing more nature into our designs will help in solving, if not all the problem, a little bit of our problems. Did I take all my time? Or do I have more?
1 minute left.
1 minute left?
Yes.
So yeah, I guess we should start with new standards for our communities, to our houses, to the new office buildings, which are empty right now because of working from home. It's a chance to re-engineer our cities in a different way. We hope it will be better, more inclusive and healthier.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Hala. Okay, our penultimate panelist today is Joe Flood, policy analyst of RMIT University. Hi, Joe.
Melbourne University.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Okay, I've been waiting all night for this. It's so if I fall asleep, you'll have to prod me for my 5 minutes.
Okay.
My background is I was one of the founders of the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute. I was the first convener of the Urban Indicators program at UN Habitat and set up the urban observatories. And since then, I've been working in about 60 countries doing things relating to city data. So that is my speciality. But sometimes I do other things. I do other sorts of policy advice, strategies and those sorts of things. I just did a housing strategy for Myanmar, for instance. I've been here in lockdown for 7 months. I have skin in the game. I'm in a high risk group. If I get it, there's a 15% chance I'll die. And it's also true of most of the people of my age group. So we take it seriously and we don't go outside very much. My esteemed colleague, Peter Hall, wrote a book called Great Planning Disasters about 40 years ago. And I've been thinking about doing a follow-up book on that. And then along comes the greatest planning disaster of them all. So I started up a website called Pandemecia, which has trouble getting through the vast noise that's been generated by the pandemic, but it's got about 60 articles in it now. And the reason it's a planning disaster is because most of the Western countries did the exact opposite to what we would have advised any developing country to do. They did it almost immediately. I will not go through the details, but let's say that they had two best practices in front of them from two Asian countries, opposite kinds of best practices. They completely ignored them, and instead they're going to get 1 million deaths as a result. Okay, now Australia has been in a privileged position. I'm from Australia, of course, and that's why I've been awake all night. We've beaten COVID twice. We're the only country to do it. Why do we have to beat it twice? Well, that itself is an interesting question. We beat it once and we got down to a single case of COVID, one, here in Melbourne. And then because of an error with quarantine, it got out again. It moved into informal sector, employment sector, and it went straight into all the old people's homes. And then we got about 4 times as big a second wave as we got at first. But we've driven it down again and we're almost done on the second one. We will eradicate it shortly. So we will follow New Zealand in that. It's not so hard for us, you realise. We're an island. We've got a very long history of quarantine, of keeping diseases out of the country and keeping people out of the country if we felt it was necessary. And really, this is just exercising things we've been doing for many years. We're also primed up because we just had massive bushfires, which are the largest on record. I think it was about, the area covered was about 5 times what California just had. So we were in a good position to go ahead, but we got through, we got down to 1 case and then there was this mistake and it got out from that 1 case. And we've had 4 times as many cases from that as we had in the original blister or bubble, whatever you care, blister or wave, whatever you care to call it. Part of the problem was the neoliberal deregulation of the workforce. After, say, about 1990, we deformalised most of the workforce. We put a lot of people in what's effectively almost an informal sector. They moved backwards and forwards between aged care centres. They all have multiple jobs. And they just spread it very quickly once it got to them, which it did in the second wave. With regard to the economy, well, we've had not that much change in the economy. Our GDP went down about 7%, which was not too bad, really. We hardly lost any labour force because the government paid everybody to stay home. Our governments have not exactly been noticeable for being very generous, but they suddenly opened their purse strings like many other governments. And all of a sudden, we've got money flowing everywhere, which made a very big difference. For the economy, well, we completely lost our second biggest industry, which was overseas students. It's a bigger industry than all our traditional agricultural exports combined. And of course, they all had to go home, and the universities are all in a state of stress because they've lost 1/3 of their income. And other industries are in a bad way, all forms of entertainment and hospitality are the worst affected.
1 minute. 1 minute.
Okay. In the city, money and people have been vacating the central city. The rent curve has been flattening. There's been a lot of pressure on the cheapest properties as people move out of the expensive one. Working from home has benefited the affluent professionals, and it's the poor part of the population that have suffered. But it depends really how I feel about this. It depends on how it's going, and at the moment it's going quite well for us. So in previous major pandemics, it gave the world some big kicks in the pants. They were terrible, terrible things, much worse than this. And they resulted in very major system change. For instance, you might say the Black Death led to the demise of the feudal system. The Spanish flu arguably led to the development of the American middle class. That's one theory. The stock market has seen the pandemic as a positive. It's boosted medical research and IT. And in Australia, we've got the situation where our budget is coming out today, which is a big thing. We've been known as a country, rather cynically, that builds nothing and does nothing, a place of houses and holes. Like other Western countries, we almost stopped building infrastructure for 30 years. And now all of a sudden there's a massive proposal to build all sorts of new infrastructure to get the place started again. And I see that's going to be an enormous fillip and boost to all these various positive things that are coming up. It's been a terrible disaster from the point of view of so many lives being lost. But there are positive ways you can look at this. Thank you.
Very excellent. Thank you very much, Joe. Okay, our final panelist is Scott D. Campbell, Associate Professor, Urban Planning, Thomann College of Architecture and Urban Planning, and Senior Fellow, Michigan Society of Fellow, University of Michigan. You may now begin, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope you can all hear me. And thanks to Alex and others at the Urban Economy Forum for the invitation. I teach urban planning, local economic development, and sustainability at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And once we have high-speed rail to connect Toronto and Chicago, we'll be at the halfway station. I have 5 minutes, so let me make three quick points. It's hard to do it. The first is I wonder how this conversation would have gone a year ago. And that is what we now do with all the theories and boosteristic rhetoric that we know how to tell about urban economics. Until 6 months ago, we knew the narrative that the urban crisis of deindustrialization and suburbanization was over. We're now in a post-industrial era of urban triumphalism. The middle class finally moved back to the cities, at least some cities, although not much to Detroit, which is an hour to our east. We read Richard Florida. Ed Glazer declared Jane Jacobs the godmother of revitalized urban ecology, of complex innovation. We chased Amazon HQ2. That seems like a long time ago. We built innovation districts. Suburban campus tech parks were a thing of the past, and we watched high-tech firms move from suburbs to the cities, certainly Silicon Valley's expansion into San Francisco. We had new modes of urban mobility, Uber and Lyft, and our biggest concerns were gentrification and high cost of housing. So now what do we do? In some ways, the tragedy of this for urbanists is that the very attributes that we promoted as the core of urban vitality and competitiveness, clustering, open architecture, social interaction, collisions that we were supposed to promote through our architecture, density, public spaces, are the ones that seem to make us vulnerable to the virus. And we all fear a kind of retreat to our cars and suburban homes. I think, therefore, too, I think the challenge of many of us is, what do we make of COVID and urbanism? How do we teach your classes? What do we do with our old theories, and how do we envision it? I think for many, it's a pause. We're holding our breath. We're hoping to get back where we were. We look back to what happened after September 11th or 2008, and predictions that the dense urbanism was dead seem to be short-lived. So can we rely on that? Is it a reset, which is exciting but scary, a pivot to something better? Is it a natural or quasi-experiment? If so, what are we experimenting with? So three, I think we're trying to figure out what to do with COVID in our past models and data and trends. I think one approach, and it was enlightening, Richard Barkham, who spoke at a plenary early this afternoon in the session from CBRE, said, follow the data, the money, look at the trends of the real estate markets, the decline in demand for certain kinds of spaces. And in some ways, that's a refreshing approach. Rather than us all speculate and come up with dreamy designs of futurism, or use COVID as a kind of ideological proxy to argue for pro or anti-urban agendas, look at the data. But we know, unfortunately, that market forces won't inherently promote equality or livability or environmentalism or carbon neutrality, or solve the housing crisis or the crisis of the labor market, especially declining female labor force participation rates, the childcare crisis that I'm sure some of you know only too well. And I really worry about what's going to happen to the shared workplace. will this accelerate the move to the self-employed gig economy and all its precarity without healthcare, retirement benefits, and job security? So we see this as an opportunity to advocate for reinventing the cities for the better, but I think we worry we won't have the money or the national leadership, at least in the US, to do so. And I think as urbanists, we have a kind of torn allegiance. I think we feel naturally inclined to defend cities, to promote dense urban living, and to claim that other explanatory factors and not urban density is highly correlated with infection rates. But perhaps our duty is in fact to promote any kind of human settlement, regardless of density. We wonder if the population votes with their feet to go to the suburbs, will we have to fight the anti-suburb battle all over again? And finally, I have a few minutes or a few seconds, I will say, I particularly worry about the retail sector. It tends to be boring. It's not as exciting as other things, but it was in crisis for decades, and now it's faced this acute shock. And it's not just retail and employment, but so much of our urbanness, and I'll end here, have tried to re-embrace the city from Jane Jacobs on Ford, new urbanism, and much of that new urbanism and walkable urbanism is built around fine-grained retail. And what will we do with all the lovely main streets and high streets and pedestrian shopping zones that we have designed if a critical mass of the shops are closed? And with that, I will stop and thank you.
Thank you. Very excellent. Thank you very much, Scott. Unfortunately, we had an update that Brian is unable to speak tonight due to technical difficulties and will be speaking tomorrow instead. Also, due to limited time, we will now give the speakers and panelists an opportunity to wrap up with 1 extra minute of time. Okay, let's start with Edmondo. Edmondo, would you like to start? Edmondo?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yes, well, unfortunately, my video it went off for some reason, but at least if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can
thank
hear
you very
you.
much again.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes. I've listened very carefully to all the presentations and it's very impressive. I thought that the second part would be a response to the presentation, the first part, but I think they brought more points, which were very important ones. So the session, in my view, included a large magnitude of issues, economic, social, environmental, political, health, of course, because of COVID, racism, and others. And the solutions, I agree with the proposed solutions in general, the community participation, environmental care, collaboration, solidarity. I sign on all of this. The question, thinking about the poor countries in the South, less than Europe and North America, is that where to start? How do you start if a given city do not have many of these important things that have been discussed? And I worked for many years at the International Labour Office. So let me bring one issue here. Of course, it's not everything is only one issue, but I want to talk a little bit about employment in livelihoods. I think that they tend to be a little bit underplayed in the urban economy. Many people think about generation of employment and livelihoods by default. If the economy grows and other things happen, then employment will come. I think we need to think about it by design. There are ways to do it by design. One of them is to foster cooperatives, talking about collaboration that was mentioned. I know it's not the final answer, but if you have a caring economy, an economy which also includes grassroots employment especially in the poor areas, I think that you can generate a virtual cycle. But I know it's not only this, but if we don't do it, it will not work. Cities which don't take care of the livelihoods of the residents will not be sustainable. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Edmundo. Michel. You may now begin if you want, Michel. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was a great session. Obviously, like many sessions, dominated by COVID-19 and trying to think forward about what the future holds. I appreciated Matty's kind of analogy of how this is really almost a kind of a perfect storm of a number of social and environmental things all kind of colliding at this kind of key moment in time. I share the kind of questioning that Scott raised of what does this mean? You know, are we all going to remain urbanists at heart, or is there a whole new theory, a whole new way we're going to be living in this world? Personally, I am a committed urbanist, and I have a faith that cities will not only survive COVID-19, but that this is a wonderful opportunity for us to reset and to rethink how we deal with a lot of issues that have been brought up related to racism and inequity, climate change, obviously, and just better governance and better implementation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Michel. Ali? Ali?
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one short remark after listening to all the marvelous contributions by the speakers and panelists. I think it's time for us, people working either on the academic or professional sides of urbanism and urbanization, to reconsider the simplicity of density and agglomeration in the idea of human habitation. I think we need what the COVID-19 pandemic and the possible implications of climate change in the future may bring our attention to is the fact that perhaps we should consider other less dense and less compact forms of human habitation, or actually be open to other ideas. Cities should not be at the center of the urban discourse for long. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Kumaresh?
Yes, after listening to the panelists, for example, when the new urban agenda was agreed to, it looked at a pattern of the past and projected a similar pattern that will go to the future. That suddenly seems to have slightly got disrupted. So there is a bit of a pause. And I think we are still in a time of a flux. And what we are trying to see is really going and seeing through a looking glass. That, some people thinking that, oh, it's going to come back to the same. Maybe I also think the same. But it has added a pause. And how do we use this pause is kind of the biggest opportunity, or it could be one of the biggest lost time period. So this is the time to think in terms of how best to get to deal with this and see this as an opportunity to recreate, and especially for developing countries, as it was mentioned. For developing countries, it's a huge, huge challenge. Employment is a challenge, economy is a challenge, urbanization is a challenge. So this is a time to think, pause and think, and that's what we need to do as we move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumaresh. Brenda, are you still there? Brenda, are you still here? Okay, let's move on to, who's this next? Matty.
Yeah, just a final thought. I think Scott's comments were really, I thought, provocative and spot on, and get us thinking about what is the future of urbanism. I mean, we've pendulum swung from urbanism being the place to be to this notion that people might be fleeing the city, and I think to me it's still very much an open question. It's it's not quite clear, and in that space, many different interest groups are trying to figure out how their perspective and their interest benefits the most. So I think really following the data and being patient and not trying to get too far out ahead with the predictions, that the anecdotal evidence that you read in the newspapers that everyone is fleeing the city may not in and of itself be accurate, but likewise, the notion that nothing is going to change out of this is perhaps also not accurate. And I would argue finally that the idea that nothing should change really is not an option. I mean, we need change. What was happening before was unsustainable in terms of affordability, in terms of the environment, in terms of racism and inequality. So I think a driver for change is key. Now the question is, what does that change look like? And I think Scott's comments in particular really, for me, just crystallized our need to be patient, to follow the data, to not hang with every newspaper article and every opinion piece, and use evidence and use our, use evidence to inform our decisions going forward.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Okay, next is Hala, please.
For me, I will think that the pandemic has been a wake-up call for us to rethink our habits, our lifestyle, even our hygiene. And in a way or another, it highlighted the problems and the gaps that were already existing, but just showed us or exposed them in a certain way that we cannot ignore them anymore. And one of these major problems was also the food safety and the provision of food in our cities, which will also have its implication to include perhaps local urban agriculture in every single space or in every single area within our communities and cities to sustain our communities and cities in a better way as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Hala. Joe, please.
Okay, I was asked early in this to do a piece in Africa with my UN Habitat colleagues. They all felt that it was the end of the city after we'd seen what happened in New York and Italy. I was not so sure, because we've predicted for a long time that virtually all the population growth in the world from now on is going to be in cities. Where are they going to go if they don't go there? They might decentralize, so if home working becomes more popular, but it doesn't mean that they won't be in cities, or at least large conurbations of some kind. So I don't really see that those sorts of grand anti-city things happening. They've always been the engine of growth, and they will continue to be the engine of growth. And yeah, I just don't feel that it's been as big an issue as some of my colleagues originally thought. One point that's worth making, though, is that in Africa in particular, and also in other developing countries, the population is a lot younger, very much younger. I did some calculations, and I found out that even though America is a third the size of sub-Saharan Africa, it's got twice as many people over 70 and 6 times as many people over 80. And therefore, the death rate is much higher in the US than it will ever be in Africa. I calculated that you could expect, this is going to run on for years, that ultimately we'll probably get about 2/3 the death in Africa we get in the USA. So, and it's on top of a whole lot of other much large epidemics that are taking place like AIDS and malaria. So it's probably not going to be that shocking to Africa. It's just an extra unpleasant thing that they don't need. And they have learned how to handle the existing epidemics and will continue to, it's not going to be as severe as people thought, is all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Scott, please.
Oh, thanks, Ali. And at least here in Michigan as well as Toronto, it's 5 o'clock, so we should all have a siesta, a cocktail, or a cup of tea. But thanks to all, and Maddie, I agree that we should all be rather cautious of kind of over interpreting the latest headlines of what's going to happen. So the thing I'll say in the next minute may fall victim to that. But I keep on thinking about all these things about decline in the workplace and office space and all that. And many people don't want to go back to the workplace, which I wonder if it's really true. And I think about how all the cultural and human practices that have kind of built around this tradition of having office space, from office culture to a whole series of satires about office life, to the whole restaurant scene that's built around serving that, to the supply sector, and certainly our commute and our whole notion about the commute to work these days kind of built around the office place. And what I said earlier about how I wonder if there's a higher sense of expectation or a social contract that if people come to work in your building that you are renting and you're there and you see them, you feel more obligated to pay them benefits and to take care of healthcare and to provide them steady work. And so this shift to homework may have all sorts of unintended consequences. Now, 3 years from now, the office market could be thriving, and we'll all laugh at this tape of what we've said. But I'm really worried about this working from home. Finally, I think that there are two different experiences for those of us of a certain age who've taught for 30 years in person. When we teach online, we are envisioning teaching in person, or if we're working online, we're still in a way envisioning this kind of muscle memory of living in a workplace. But I look at my kids who are unfortunately in college or entering the labor force and realizing, are they entering a world where they will know education or higher education primarily online and work online? And that's going to create a very different kind of generation of people of how they engage city. And I'll just say our oldest daughter has left San Francisco, realizing that if you telework, there's no need to pay $5,000 a month in rent. And I wonder how broad that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Okay, we have Reza Pourwaziri with us. Reza, would you like to share your thoughts in this session shortly?
I really appreciate all of you. It was really interesting discussion. Yeah, in general, I believe from my perspective and from Urban Economy Forum perspective, I believe based on the situation, many things have to change. But who wants to start based on which resources? In the global scale, we face with serious problem. Government don't want to spend enough resources about, in general, in reality, about sustainability. Of course, they are talking about that, but seriously, it's a serious challenge. We need to create this dialogue and try to realize in real scale.
Okay, thank you very much for remarkable points. I would like to thank you all, speakers and panelists, for your great contribution. I would like to thank the organizer of the second Urban Economy Forum in general, and Mr. Reza Pourwaziri, chair of UEF, and his colleagues in particular for organizing this virtual conference. I will summarize this session and highlight the common themes or actions to be included in the resolution drafting. And with that, I would like to thank you all for attending this informative session. I will now hand over back to my colleague in UEF. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
All the participants.
So as everyone is aware, the UEF 2020 is a two-day conference. So we will share more kind of transformative ideas and exciting kind of approaches tomorrow with broader kind of range of experts from all over the world. So we hope to see you guys again tomorrow. I know that you guys are quite busy with your work, but and hopefully so the one important part of tomorrow's conference is going to be drafting of the resolution of UEF 2020, which is going to take place I think for the last 2 hours of the conference. So if you have very kind of important ideas that you would like to emphasize that we should include during the resolution, we encourage you to participate. And I thank you again so much for your time and joining us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye now. Bye. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.